Geared Up North, your compass in the wilderness. We're passionate outdoorsmen turned gear gurus on a mission to equip you with tools, insights, and camaraderie to conquer the great outdoors. From North America's hunting fields and icy waterways, join us for gear reviews, tips, and lessons learned. Welcome to Geared Up North.
Oh!
Martin here with Geared Up North, another installment of the Rutcation Station series we're doing for the rut that's coming up for everybody. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Bo from HattyBo Game Calls out of Arkansas. He does grunt calls. Do you do any other type of calls? You do mainly whitetail calls?
I kind of have a turkey hunting line. My first love was turkey hunting and turkey calling, so I still flirt with it. And we're going to be offering a trumpet call this coming spring. So yeah, I flirt and dabble with them. Yeah, and locator calls, make crow calls, owl hooters, pileated woodpeckers for the turkey hunting fanatics out there like myself. Yep.
Got it. So is that kind of, just to give some people some back history, is if you had to pick between the two, do you prefer to turkey hunt, whitetail hunt, preference?
It's going to be odd for me to say this, but my passion, what got all this started, was turkey hunting.
Okay.
And I've got several stories that I could tell about my uncle taking me out, but I think it's 42 years ago, my uncle grabbed me up as a teenage boy and he said, hey, I want to show you something. And he took me out there, and I may forget where my keys is at, today, but I can remember every bit of that day that occurred 42 years ago, where he took it out in March and called up a wild turkey for me to look at. And that just kind of set the passion off of making the sounds, the calling, all that stuff. So, but if I had to pick between the two, I struggle with the patience of deer hunting. I do it and I bow hunt, and I've killed my share of deer, but Martin, if you're gonna nail me down, I'm gonna have to go with turkey hunting.
That's
100%.
perfectly fine. To me, I have a little bit of patience. I think for me, I prefer more of the challenge with whitetail hunting. But I
Oh,
agree with you.
I,
I agree
I
with you on the turkey hunting thing. It's more of the, I wouldn't even say it's instant gratification, but it's more of the, always, like, if you're fishing, you can always at least see the fish in the water where it's chasing your lure, compared to like the whitetail. There's no guarantee that he's right around the corner. You could sit there for 4 days in a row in the best spot in the
that
world, and if they're
100
not there, they're just not there.
100%. I've got the greatest admiration for guys because to be successful whitetail hunter, it takes a tremendous amount of dedication and a lot of time, boots on the ground. And my son, he's caught that bug. I raised him, and uh, he got his first deer through my instruction, and now he's got the bug, and he just amazes me. But it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and like you said, it's a gamble. At least the turkeys gobble, you know. So
Right. That's the one thing they talk back, no different than the
yeah,
ex-wife or the ex-girlfriend.
you've got to go on the secret sign with the deer. You've really topography and reading the land, and really, I think it's such a nuanced thing. I remember years ago, North American Whitetail posed a question: which is harder to kill, a 4-year-old whitetail buck or 4-year-old gobbler? And my first thought, it's not even close. A 4-year-old buck, um, they are a creature in of themselves, especially in a place like Arkansas, maybe some of these other hard hunted areas. They're a different animal than a wild turkey. So yeah, I admire the heck out of you guys that can go and do that and spend the time. I don't have the time now because this has just exploded into a different animal, but I've done it, and it takes a lot of dedication. So hats off to you guys and guys
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it, because I agree. It's a lot of you got to put in a lot of work to be successful.
Yeah. And I don't think people, I don't think people understand it. I remember an anecdote years ago that a woman came up to a concert pianist and said she wanted her daughter to be able to play just like he just played. And he said, well, are you willing to dedicate 20 years of your life practicing 6 to 8 hours a day with no possible guarantee of success to get to this level? So that's just all of it. I mean, and we can touch on this as we go further through this, but one of the things you got to do is you just got to practice. And I don't think people understand that whitetail scouting or turkey scouting, that's practicing all of that. The whitetails, the setting up your gear, going out in the woods, practicing what you've learned, keeping notes, checking your maps, especially with the maps nowadays. It used to be on a true topographic map where we would write in things, but now with Onyx and hunt apps and stuff like that, it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of practice, and
Yeah, because I agree with you. The reference that I always tell is I have a few friends that are in the trades, and I own a business in the trades as well. It's no different than picking up a certain skill. If that's being a carpenter, an electrician, or a plumber, the only way that you're going to learn that is by doing it numerous and numerous times. There's not any videos you can watch. There's not any shortcuts. The best thing you can do is just be out in the field. That's your best educator.
unfortunately, I think people buy the latest bow, the latest gun, the latest call, thinking that's going to be a hack. And some of this stuff you can't hack. And hunting big bucks, there's things you can do to improve your success. And I've always said that my calls, they're not a magic flute. You're not going to be able to go out in Walmart parking lot and call up a whitetail buck, and they're not going to magically make bucks appear if they're not around. So you've got to do your legwork. But if you do all that homework and you're dedicated, such as you and others, it is just a really effective tool to maybe increase your chances of success. And that's just the truth of it. Same way with shooting your bow, or you know, learning how to place your tree stand, all those things. I mean, and you understand that, and people on this channel, they surely understand it. Or fishing, there's some people can't fish. They just, they just can't fish. It's not in their wheel house to the dedication it takes to just read cover and be able to, that lure application. So everything you're saying, I 100% agree with. It's all
Yeah,
about.
so can we and yeah, to me, it makes that it's just to the point of if you don't put enough time in any sort of trade or any sort of outdoor hobby or activity, you're only gonna be average. There was one video or some short clip that I had seen in another group chat I'm in where they were talking about the amount of hunters in Ohio and, like, the different percentages of X amount of people and how much are actually hunters and how much time they spend in the woods. Even if it's 4 days, 6 days, like the average person, I think the stat line said was like 6 days scouting and or hunting in the woods. And I'm like, that also explains why the success rate sometimes is literally like 5% to less than that.
Yeah, the success rate of bow hunter is just incredibly low. When you read 12% or 15%, I don't know what it is here. I think it's below 20% here in Arkansas. Um, that means 85% of the people that endeavor to be bow hunters or kill a bow or kill a deer with a bow, they fail. And that's a huge failure rate. But it's that way with anything, that either they're really, really lucky, or you put in the time and make your own luck, if that is accurate.
I agree. Um, can you I know you kind of highlighted that you started out doing the game calls and that your uncle got you into turkey hunting. How did you get started making what kind of started the route for the buck calls or the grunt calls?
Well, on the tail end of that turkey season that occurred 42 years ago, my uncle uh, grabbed me up again in October, and during our muzzleload season, took me out there and set me down in a spot. And uh, ironically, um, there were some turkeys came in behind me, and I wanted to mess with them. I always carried a turkey call with me because I was learning the craft. So the turkeys came in behind me, and I wanted to go bust them up like you do in the fall and call them back. Well, in that process of walking to where that they were meandered to, I saw something in the woods, and I heard a grunt. I didn't know what it was at the time, but heard it and then seen the buck and ended up killing the buck. And I, you know, I was around. I've been doing this long enough that I remember when grunt calls came on the scene, and we really didn't know in these camps how to use them. So we would just go out in the woods and just blow them, just toot, 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 toot like a kazoo. And the first big buck that I ever killed was down in a refuge down here south called Muddy Creek. I saw that buck. He was traveling parallel to me in a creek bottom, and I grunted him, and he came up, and I shot him at about 10 yards with a muzzleloader. I was kind of above him on the hill, and I was just amazed that I could bring in this animal. So fast forward years later, again with the obsession of turkey calling, I started breaking turkey calls apart just to see. I was into it that deep, and just seeing, you're laying precept on precept, knowledge upon knowledge, to try to learn this craft. And again, going back to what you said, whatever you do, whether it's carpentry or fishing or whatever, you're so into it that you just want to know everything you can about it. And so I would break these apart, see how they work. I'd listen to turkey caller. I was a competition turkey caller for several years. I won the Arkansas State Amateur in 1990, placed third in the state that same year. So I was just delved into this. And it was, I don't know how many years ago, probably about 21 years ago. I was talking to a guy I was going to church with at the time, and he was a cabinet maker, and I was talking about making calls, and he said, "Hey, could you use a lathe?" I said, "Sure." I said, "You got one?" He said, "Yeah, I got a Rowley lathe. I'll let you have, and you can just play with it." And boy, that just kind of blew it up for me. So I started coming up with my own designs, and there wasn't a lot of information out there, and that's still kind of held close to the vest about what makes a good call. And so made those, learning about wood densities, what works, and all of that goes into call making, especially when you make exclusively wood calls like I do. Things like what woods sound good, resonance, and that type of stuff. And I just made them on my own, and I gave a few and maybe sold one or two for $20 to people that wanted them. But looking back, they were pretty crude, but they worked. And I was working with a guy, and he asked me if I could make a coon squaller. And I thought, well, I can try, and end up making him one. And he was a competition coon hunter at the time. And since I did so good with that, he approached me again and said, "Can you make a duck call?" Now, I'll tell you one thing, Martin, duck calls, they are the most persnickety, nuanced call, in my opinion, out there, because one stroke when you're filing down a tone board or something, and you'll run that call. So that is how I learned about reed tension, back pressure, uh, the different males, the thicknesses of the reeds, what reeds want to do, cutting and stuff like that. So I made him one, sold a few, and then he came to me and he said, "Well, can you make a deer call?" And he's a good friend of mine. We communicate almost every day. We used to work together. Anyway, that's how it kind of got started. And that was, I think, 2015. So 10 years ago. And I didn't like what was out there. And I didn't want to copy what other people were doing. So we live in an amazing time, whereas I don't think people understand this, is that the amount of information that is on YouTube. So you want a game call to sound exactly like the game that you're pursuing. And it would take decades and maybe a lifetime to listen to the amount of grunts that you needed. You may not even have that experience 30 years ago. I mean, you would have to have recording equipment to capture that buck sound and then take it back and build a call off of that. So as I layered in what I could do with the duck call, I began to listen to videos that were captured on various hunting channels, and you can type in what buck grunt sounds like, and there's plenty of YouTube footage out there. So I just began to study it and listen to it, and I think I have an ear for it, and just to be able to mimic sound, and I've always been that way. And so I just started building it, and what makes mine unique is the entrance and exit holes on it. It's traditionally smaller than what 99% of them out there. It's whereas most of them are 3/4. I decided to go with a 5/8 inch hole, and it made a difference as far as, again, going back to the back pressure, what I learned making duck calls. And I really didn't believe in the product and I beat myself up. I'm kind of a perfectionist, but I had a good friend of mine that he was just shocked by how good they sounded. He started taking them and telling his friends about it. And I think, Martin, the real big break for the deer calls, there's a guy over here named Richard Fott, and he's been on several podcasts. He killed 20, he has killed 26 or 27 Pope and Young bucks with his bow, all on public land. And he heard about me, and he had a Facebook page at the time, I think had close to 100,000 people on it, and he endorsed it. And when he endorsed it, that was in 2017, that this is the call I'm going to be using, guys. I was flooded with orders. And fortunately, the call was at a place where it sounded good, it looked good. And I believe there's a difference in making through a wood tube versus a plastic tube. You know, it's just me based off, you know, my sound studies. And once he did that, I took 2 weeks of orders off of that Facebook post, and I was 6 months fulfilling those orders, trying to get them filled. So right then and there, we quit taking orders, and I still don't take orders, because it takes a while to make them, and there's a perfection component in it. So that's kind of how it, just in a nutshell. That was a pretty big nutshell, pretty long story, but it just kind of exploded from 2017, and everything's fall in place, and they fall in place with me about these, but that's just how it got started. Started
No, and that to me, that makes complete sense, but I think it's cool to understand the full depth behind it by kind of like explaining a lot of it instead of just saying like a short 2 to 3 minute thing. What were some of the things that you noticed in those game calls before you made your own that you didn't like?
Well, once I started listening to the recordings that were captured via YouTube and the audio that they were getting with these really good cameras, is that they don't sound like deer. They sound close enough. And I don't ever despair or downplay another person's call. If people tell me I like this call and I've called in multiple deer with, that's fine. But what I'm trying to do in my own personal quest is to make the best sounding deer call that I can make. And they didn't have the clicky sound that I was hearing. And to me, I think it has a bass note that has somewhat like a feeding chuckle of made with a duck call. And of course, that kind of bled in well with what I'd learned with making duck calls all those years. And I just didn't think that it sounded. And when I first started, I actually made the plastic tube calls, like I have the plastic extension tubes, because I didn't know which way I wanted to go. Traditionally, everybody liked the plastic tubes, but I wanted to do something different. So thinking, I don't know if you've ever heard a cedar duck call, but a cedar duck call, there's a term that they call it, it's ducky. And I began to take that knowledge and thought, well, would it make the sound make a difference coming through a natural tube? And so I had a lady on Facebook tell me that she thought plastic deer calls sound plastic. And I never really thought about that, but you could hear it a little bit. And again, apples to oranges, I mean, it may not matter, but it mattered to me. So I decided to ditch the plastic and go with an all wood grunter. And man, it just, like I said, I took on the orders. I didn't even get to hunt the 2017 season. So around in 2018, everybody's telling me their success and they did this and did that. I just decided to go hunting, and I sat down the first time behind my dad's land, some private land I had permission to hunt, and I just grunted, and here come an 8-point just running right up to me. And I called it 5 bucks on 7 sets, and I thought, well, we're on to something here, and the rest is kind of history. But I just didn't. I didn't like. I guess to put it, to wrap it up, they just didn't sound like an actual deer to me. In my years of competition calling and just being fascinated with the wild turkey's language, I think you need to have a call that sounds exactly like the animal you're pursuing, and that's the quest of
Yeah,
every.
100%, because you're trying to mimic or kind of act like that creature, no different than like what you're talking about with the turkey calls. If you're doing any sort of, yelps or clucks or kikis. Like if you're off a little bit, they'll notice the difference. And this is from my own experience. Like if you obviously like you're going on your slate and you miss slide a little bit, like they're gonna notice that. It doesn't sound normal.
Right. Yeah. And people argue, well, I'm not that best caller, and I call up all kinds of wild turkeys and deer. Granted, maybe you're an excellent woodsman. And that's more important than calling. But if you're going to pick up a call, don't you want it to sound exactly like the animal you're pursuing, whether it's
Yeah,
a squirrel,
100%.
goose, or an elk, or any of that stuff. So that was just kind of my mindset. It kind of bled out of the turkey and the duck calling, and I, I'm just always fascinated when I'm able to use my own product and I call in game. I remember I got a picture on my phone, the first duck I ever called in with one of my duck calls. And my buddy, he said, "Why are you taking a picture of that old nasty duck?" I said, "Well, it means something." And it sounded enough like a duck. So yeah, that's it. I just didn't like what was out there. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Let's do it
Oh, that
right.
makes sense. So kind of go to dive in a little bit more. Obviously, you're using mainly wood. Do you get different tones or you could say textures out of different types of wood? Or is it kind of similar because of the structure of the hard surface?
Right. Well, let me give you a little. I'll give you some insight theory in the way my mind works, and I'm gonna use a lake. If you've ever been on a lake and it's clear, or it's calm, not choppy. Have you ever noticed how you're able to hear people a long ways? Like you can hear them talking on the bank far, way farther than you can if there were trees involved. Or so I have this theory that the slicker a surface is, the better the sound travels over it. If we live close to a military base here that ran, they do practice shoot off artillery shells, and it's probably, as the crow flies, 25 miles from my house here. On cloudy days, when the cloud cover is low, and it will rattle the windows here versus a clear day. Now, why do I say that? Sound has some really unique properties, and I think there's a reason that acrylic duck calls sound different than wood duck calls. I think this is my own personal feeling about this, is that harder surfaces, the sound travels over them easier than, say, a more porous wood. And I people say that it doesn't matter, and I agree to a point. I think it does produce a nuanced sound. Now, does that matter to the white-tailed deer or the wild turkey? I don't know, but acrylic duck calls have a clearer, more crisp sound, even though the tone board and everything's the same as a wood duck call. It's just traveling on that super hard surface. So the old men that we're building off of as far as call makers. I People ask me this all the time, actually. Well, if you had to pick one wood for a deer call, what would it be? And I tell them that those old timers knew about walnut. The walnut is a very unique call, and honestly, Martin, you wouldn't be able to tell it unless you've tuned thousands. The average guy that picks up one of my calls, he's not going to really be able to tell the difference. And I don't even know, again, apples to oranges, if it even matters. But I personally think, going through a tube, that it sounds different. And I go back to the plastic versus the wood. I just think everything comes together, that it maybe sounds more natural. The magic happens in the way that I tune them and the reeds that I select. But after all that, I think coming through a wood tube, it does it adds a certain bit of realism to the sound. So I think there is a difference between the woods.
No, that's good. So obviously, what are the different wood options that you offer?
Well, right now, we have the walnut, the Bolivian rosewood, the antique finished oak, which is just a special finish that I put on them to make it look like it's aged. They're made out of white oak and Bacote. And this year we're offering what I call blackened oak, which again, it's walnut, but again, that same concoction that I come up with, I started applying it to the walnut, and it really makes it really, really black, and people like the blackened calls. Now, there's no difference in the sound between a regular walnut and the black walnut. It's just an appearance thing. But those are the woods we offer. The antique oak, maybe flirt with cedar a little bit, but that's to be determined. Going into this season. But our big four is walnut, the Bacody, the Bolivian rosewood, and the antique oak. So
Okay, and then you do a grunt call. Do you also do like a doubly?
yeah, we this year. Now I don't have any field feedback yet, but this year or last year I invented this, and the reason this came about. The reason this came about is I was getting a lot of feedback from the field where people were sending me pictures. And every year we have a Show Your HattyBo contest. It's a nationwide contest. If you have a HattyBo assisted kill and you frame the call in the picture that you send me, I put that in an album. And at the end of the year, everybody votes on it. And whoever garners the most vote, I give away free calls. We have a youth division and adult division. So I get all this feedback from all over the nation. And a lot of them were saying that I was grunting on your grunt tube, and then I switched it over to doe bleat, and I bleated this buck in that, I've sent you a picture. So I thought, well, why not just make a standalone bleat call? And so again, to the drawing board, I knew what I could do with my system, and I came up with, I call it the Hattie Doe, but it's a little short. It's an inhale exhale, doe bleat. And traditionally everybody understands the can, the Primos can, but right. I'll say this. I've never personally called up a deer with the can, but I have people that swear by them. So we tried it. I went to the drawing board. I invented this, and it's a little short thing, and you can use it in combination with other, but it will do the can thing, and you're able to control it. And you can get really, really loud because, some people like to broadcast it with a big net. So it offers that option of blowing through it, exhaling through it to be really, really loud, or you inhale to it and, little short doe bleeds. And I have personally experienced where a buck would be dogging a doe and she would be making that sound. So we'll see. I'm excited to see once the rut starts kicking up here and all over the nation because I've sold quite a few of them, about the feedback, how effective it is, because it offers you the option to kind of control what a can couldn't do.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And honestly, if you've got any of those, I'd be interested to purchase one and give feedback on it. Because I agree with you. I've never called in a mature buck, but I have called in deer with a doe bleat before. It's probably a 2-year-old or younger, but just the fact of having something that's a little bit more real than the Primos can, and something to your point where you have the ability that you can do both the inhale and the exhale, where you can control how loud or soft you want that to be, no different than like cranking the dial in your truck.
Right.
I think that's the big difference with your calls from my own perspective, is the ability to exhale, or you have a lot more variability instead of trying to like use something that's got the
right.
plastic tone to it.
Yeah. The analogy I use is that you may have what is a deer in a creek bottom or just out of sight, and the ability to softly inhale, just a soft grunt, may be the key to getting that deer to take a look-see. So yeah, I like the ability, the option to be able to inhale through a HattyBo or the Hattie Doe and just give a soft little bleat or grunt at just the right time. And it may make the difference. You don't know what's standing down in that creek. You don't know what kind of headgear he's got, or she's got, but a little soft grunt, and they sneak in and take a look-see.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's do this. You've obviously got the dual bleat, and I've got this grown call in front. What are some common issues hunters face with their calls?
Well, as far as mine is that they're made out of wood, and wood breathes, it expands and it contracts. And I try to put a finish on these to prevent that from actually happening. But one of the things is, well, at least at my calls, is exposing them to high heat. Um, I went into the local sporting goods store up here that carries mine on their website, and I saw one of my calls on the dash, and this was in August, and that thing's just cooking on there. And I went in the store and I said, uh, went back kind of in the hunting area. I said, "Hey, you guys here got a HattyBo call out on your dash?" And like the guy came up and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm the creator of those, and you're gonna have problems with that. But wood dries out, and if you put it in a high heat, low humidity environment, it's gonna suck the moisture out of it and may crack on you." Um, as far as you want to speak toward maintenance, as far as problems that
Yeah,
they
sure, like, obviously with that, but even this is there any, like, say, for example, I got this last year or 2 years ago. Is there any, like, yearly maintenance or something they should do before season or after season? No different than, like, a tune-up or an oil change on your car. Is there any sort of tips for maintenance on these?
right? Yeah, that's a very important point because I have I have had people contact me and say, "Hey, I went to call in a deer. I hadn't touched this thing since last year. It was in my pack, and I go to use it, and it squealed on me or it squeaked out." And what happens, and you could apply this to all deer calls, not just mine, is that what happens as you're carrying this around your chest, if it's on the lanyard, um, we all like our snacks. Now think about it. This is a high moisture environment. You're breathing into it, just like a duck call. And if you've ever ran duck calls or made them, they eventually stick and they'll freeze up. And what happens is if you've eaten sausage, egg, cheese, biscuit, or you've eaten a little Debbie, and it's moisture rich environment, you blow into that debris falling from the trees, or you're climbing your tree stand, you've got this around your neck, oak bark, and whatever else, dust, lint, if you've had in your pocket, all of that collects underneath this reed. And so what I tell people is that take it out a few weeks before season, and this is just a simple receipt, a Walmart receipt or something like that, and just take that and I don't know if you can see that, but you just run that under the reed and kind of give it a back and forth, and all that concrete that from the moisture and your little Debbie snack cakes or whatever you're eating, your crustables, uh, if that collects underneath there and solidifies, what it's doing, it's shortening that reed. It would be no different than if you move this O-ring out and you go to grunt on it, or you thinking you're grunt, and you get, and that would be a doe bleating, and that's not what you want. So if you just do that before season, and I think another thing that people need to do is that I try to make them all have the same amount of pressure as far as blowing into it, is practice with it. Uh, know what your call will do. You know, uh, is just kind of see what it'll do, what it sounds like when you inhale. You inhale through it, that type of thing. And what you're doing there is you're learning what your call will do, the sounds that you can get out of it, and also you're learning about volume, because I can increase the volume of my particular call. And this is what I've learned kind of with other grunters too, is that we normally run them to our mouth where the reed is setting like that. You know, our mouth will be like, but I found that you can turn that over, what you would call upside down, and it adds volume to it. So this is traditional. I just turn that over, same amount of air pressure. You see it? It makes a difference. But it's just little old things like that that as you play with them, and I'm not allowed to run turkey calls in the house just because my wife can't stand it. But the deer grunters, of course, I blow them all the time. I'm practicing every day, tuning them and shipping them off to wherever. But that's just kind of what I would tell people, is that get them out before season. The bow season, the official bow season starts Saturday here in Arkansas. And for all of my Arkansas listeners that are going to be listening to this, as I share it to my page eventually, is that you need to get it out. and before you first use it, and just see if it sounds right. As far as maintenance and stuff, I like to store them in this state right here. As far as mine is that just a little bit apart in case the wood does shrink on you. You don't want to struggle to try to get it apart and that type of stuff. But I really I built these as best I could like a battleship, because I know hunters are really tough on their equipment. I'm tough on my equipment, and so I tried to build them as monkey proof as I could. And so, but they do take a little bit of maintenance, and this crosses over to any deer call you've got. It doesn't if you use an extinguisher or a HS strut or any of the grunters that are out there, is this maintenance thing crosses over, because the magic happens right here at this reed. So that right there has to vibrate, otherwise you've got a kazoo. So just make sure that there's no debris or anything underneath that call, underneath that call reed, and you'll be fine.
To kind of circle back, I remember you talked about that story where you used your first grunt call and you were able to call in 5 different bucks. What time of year was that? Was that just because I
Well,
know it's a little different for you guys in the South with when your rut is. I'm just curious on for anybody nationwide if they could use certain calling tactics at certain times of the year more than others.
yeah. Oh, most definitely. Uh, I I have found that in my study of whitetail language is that does and bucks, they grunt more than a lot of people think that they do. I've watched a group of does go through a clear cut where they really can't see each other, and they'll grunt periodically just to keep track of where everybody's at. A mama with her fawns, them fawns grow up listening to that mama grunt to them. So it's a natural sound. You're not going to spook a deer off when you do it correctly. Now, he may spook out for other reasons. He saw you. Um, he catches your wind, obviously. But as far as they do that sound all the time. So the early buck that I called in, I had a messed up shoulder at the time, so I had to use a crossbow. I was sitting on the ground and I grunted, but I just did. This is what I do early: is 3 or 4, just what I call contact grunts, and deer are social. They want to know who is in their atmosphere, and there's a whole hierarchy about as far as does and bucks, and it just ramps up as we get closer to the rut as far as the bucks go. But you're trying to basically say, hey, I'm over here. They don't really know why you're grunting, but it's something that they're used to hearing. And if it sounds like a deer, they may come in to, and that's kind of a blind calling scenario. So I was just sitting there, didn't know there was a buck in the area. And I just gave out 3 or 4, what I call contract grunts. Now, he didn't know what that was, but he knew that there was a deer over there in his mind. And he walked up like 10 steps from me, and um, he had a bunch of stuff over his chest. And I really couldn't get the shot. That was in October, early October. So he responded to that sound, just those 4 or 5 contact grunts. Um, and that's kind of what I do. I'm not really that highly nuanced. Now, when it gets close to the rut, and I rut really toward the 1st of November, they're really in that seeking, not the seeking phase, but they're kind of that traveling stage, running their scrapes and hooking trees. Um, and so it's just kind of a general call that will alert the deer. And I've had people like, how many notes do you do? And I've got a little, I don't know what you'd call it, but a remembering tool is one one to one to know, 2 to show, and 3 to go. So this is my thinking on it. That deer is just minding his own business. He's walking through wherever. He don't even know you're around, and he's sniffing the ground, scanning the horizon. His ears are cupped. They're, whitetails deer ears are all the time turning. They're trying to catch up ambient sound. And that first grunt, he recognizes that because he's heard it his entire life. And that stops him. And that's the one to know. Like he begins to, or to show. That's the one that shows that deer that there's another deer in the area. Now, two, the second grunt that you do, it's to know, like confirm, because he may not hear the first one. He heard something. He stops. He throws his ears up. He's scanning. He's not quite sure. And anybody's called any deer, they know they get in that mode. The second one is to know that there's a deer there. That's why I do 2 or 3 or 4. And third and fourth one, the third one, just because of the, the remembering phonic, is to go. And you want him to go at that point to make a decision. Now he may not come. As good as I think my calls sound, and I know they sound that good. And I was deep in the mountains a few years ago, and a buck came through that I wanted to shoot with a bow, and I was on the ground actually, just kind of walked in there to see what was going on. I grunted, and he looked right at me, and he just turned his head and went on his way. And they don't always respond 100% of the time, but he, for whatever reason, he didn't want to mess with me, and that's fine. I mean, I'll get you another day. But that's kind of what I go through. There is, I'll fall back to Mr. Fott here. He came up with this technique, and I've heard from people that it's very effective. And he hunts in the hardwood bottoms of East Arkansas, river bottoms. He will every 15 minutes, which I usually wait 30 minutes between grunting sessions. But he will send out 15 to 20 grunts just in succession, sounding like a buck chasing a doe. And what he's doing, he's like casting a lure every 15 minutes. Any cruising bucks out here in long distance, he's trying to portray an image that there is a buck chasing a doe over here, and he calls in an amazing amount of deer. And that is his rut tactic. And that is the peak of the rut. They're chasing, they're running after does, but he will just, now for me, and here's another one of my here's my mindset on this. When I run this call, I don't run it on that deep, throaty buck sound. When I'm doing buck rutting grunts, is that I move it out to that first one. Here's the thought: is that you're a teenager. You're wanting to challenge the big boy. You want to sound like an immature buck because he is far more likely, or some buck close to him in that whole dominance hierarchy, it may come in to check it out. But if you sound like the biggest, roughest, snortingest bull of the woods, I mean, I don't know. And there's a lot of subdominant bucks that I will shoot every single day with the headgear. And you have seen really dominant bucks that have smaller headgear than maybe a subdominant buck. They just got more fight in them. But if it's about antlers, sounding like a little old tipped up teenager, and he does something like this. It's that grinding every step, buck chasing a doe, and he'll run out 10, 15, 20 of those, and he'll wait 15 minutes, that's a very short amount of time. But what he's doing, he is just casting a broad net, any bucks that may be cruising, because when they're running, a buck can travel a long ways in 10 minutes.
Right.
And so that is his mindset of trying to get these bucks, and it's quite effective for him. But I called up a buck on December 2nd. I remember the day. It was after a cold front, and it settled in on high pressure. And I did a quick grunt sequence, just something like this. And almost immediately, I looked up the road there. I was on an old logging road, and this buck's standing there, and he's looking. And I was close to his bedding area. I knew where he's bedding at from previous scouting. And he just came running, full tilt. Again, I was sitting on the ground with a crossbow. And I will say this, sitting on the ground with a deer grunter, it's tough to pull that shot off because they will come right exactly to you. And I didn't even have a tree stand at that time. I had not hunted in a long time, and I'd given my tree stand, my climbing stand, to my son. He had it, so I was sitting on the ground with a crossbow, and these bucks, they come right in, but they come in straight on. It's kind of like elk hunting. You kind of got to get off the side so they give you a broadside shot at least. So I wasn't able to take the shot, but he came up. Actually, Martin, he came up within maybe 8 yards. I had on full camouflage, minus my fluorescent orange, because it was toward the end of rifle season here, and and there was a couple of others that I grunted in, but the contact grunts, 3 or 4 contact grunts, you're just trying to broadcast that, throw that lure out there that, hey, there's a deer over here, and it goes back to what we previously talked about, is that if they're 100% that is a deer from the sound, whether it's coming through that wood tube or HattyBo, it's got that clicky sound. If they're in a social mood, they're going to come over. I mean,
Yeah, that makes sense. For when you're doing that contact grunt, for the people that aren't watching the video portion of this, what are you doing with your hands to kind of like enunciate or add more more
well,
variety to
uh,
call?
I built my calls. They are ergonomic, where as far as you place your hand, and you kind of put that in the notch between your pointing finger and your thumb, and you kind of cup over it, like you make an additional sound chamber, and you can extend. A lot of people, they identify with that deep throaty sound, and that's fine. Do what you're comfortable with. If you've heard that before and you want to mimic that, uh, compared to the long black extension tube, this is really not that long a tube, but you can extend it by putting that in the crotch of your finger and then make a cupping sound. Yeah, yeah. For those that are watching the video, I mean, that's twice as long as that shorty that he's got there in his right hand. But you can, if you like that, just cup your hands, and it gives it more of a deep, bellowy. And what you're doing, you may not be able to see that at home, but those who are watching video, like Martin pointed out, is that I am throwing different sound. How can you explain it? Is that it's diverting
You're
sound.
manipulating it, so it's no different than like a duck call or a goose call. You're manipulating your hands to kind of bring variety, or I wouldn't even say volume, but you're kind of creating no different than like music. You're creating those like ups and downs by just doing like you're talking about the
And you don't want him to pinpoint you. Is you want him to think that there's a general area where there's a buck at, or a doe, and you want him just in a general, like a casual mood, where he comes over. And if you're just blasting it right at him, he's going to be he'll be more uh, available, or he will have a better chance at pinpointing you in the tree. And that's something that's not talked a lot about as far as calling. It's big in the turkey hunting world. It's camouflage is when you call, especially if you're blind calling, you've got to have the proper camouflage, because if the call does what the call is supposed to do, and you've done the little nuance where you're cupping your hands and you're throwing the sound in different directions, you can't really pinpoint you. Um, he's probably just going to kind of meander by you looking for that deer he heard. But if you blast it right at him, and you blast it multiple times, and you just keep calling, he's going to walk right to your tree. And I learned that the hard way. A buck I called in a few years ago, I saw, sure enough, Pope and Young, and I didn't know he had another buck with him. But I grunted to the big one, and he was killed by a youth hunter about 3 or 4 weeks later during a muzzleload season. That joker had 19-inch G2s. He was a dandy.
holy crap, that's big for down by you guys.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's the deer I saw. So I grunted at that deer, like he was kind of trailing away from me. And I sat down, like, well, it was a good experience. And directly I hear, and I see a deer coming, but I can't see its headgear. So I get ready. And I'm bow hunting. And this buck, which it turned out to be a decent 8-point, enough for me to shoot with my bow. I thought he was going to go either side of that cedar that was just about 10 yards from me. No, he came right through it and was 3 yards underneath my stand. But the reason I tell you that story is that they can pinpoint you with those cupped ears pretty good. And especially, I was kind of desperate to get him back because he was so big, so I probably overcalled. And you need to keep it as subtle as you possibly can. And I will not call to a deer that is looking in my direction if I can keep from it, because with those ears, God gave them those ears to lock in on sound, and their survival is dependent upon it, to be able to hear things approaching them. In the same way as that, if they hear sound out there. So I learned something years ago from turkey hunters that you never call to that turkey when he has a direct line of sight to your eye. If you can see each other eye to eye, don't call to him. Wait till his head goes behind a tree and then call to him, because that prevents him. Of course, the tree's blocking the sound, but he still hears it. And you just want them generally to head your direction so that you can be ready with your bow or your gun. And of course, gun hunting changes that. It's just, I will give another little tip here for people that, as far as calling, is that for years I've called it the pull up. It kind of came from turkey hunting, is that when you're calling to turkey and you've yet to see him, you know he's coming, right? You can tell he's getting closer. There's a moment where he's doing his thing, he's walking, and you see him, and all of a sudden he pulls up and he's looking. That's when you fully convince that game animal that you are, a critter that he identifies with. And you got to be real careful. You definitely don't call to them when they do that pull up. And whitetails do that too. You just want them to pull up, looking in an area where you are not, and then you can pull the shot off. So a whitetail, he's coming along, and then he'll pull up and he'll look. You don't want him looking directly at you. And overcalling will do that. If your camouflage is good, this is kind of a game of hide and seek. If you're hid and you use a HattyBo call, he will seek you out. You just don't want him to really know where you're hiding at. And that's one of the things that I've learned, because I've been busted. I grunted in a buck 3 years ago. I heard him raking a tree. And one of the things I like to do is go into these drainages and kind of tee into them. You've got a drainage running east-west. They mainly run east-west here in Arkansas. Is if I find a good ridge, it's got fingers coming off of it, they'll run those creek bottoms. And I like to tee into those, like they're running like this, and I just come in and tee into them.
Yeah, so for people, like, for the audio listeners, what he's talking about is sitting at the head of a drainage ditch, or in Bobby Worthington's terms, a one-sided rut funnel, and being able to cast that call down the drainage towards the stream.
Right. And I had found this area on the map. It was off the road a little bit. You had to walk a real steep hill, which I don't have a problem with that. A lot of hunters do, and that gives me the advantage. But I was able to tee into this. So it's kind of an observation thing, but also I've got my bow with me. So I shinny up an oak with my lone wolf climber, and I'm sitting there and I hear what I really believe to be, you can actually call deer in by raking an antler against a tree. I've done that down at that previously mentioned Muddy Creek Refuge, that raking against a tree and grunting. Anyway, I heard that.
Just sorry to stop you. So mainly you're just taking, and this is just for reference, you're taking something, and it doesn't need to be this big. It can be something smaller, and you're grunting with one, and then you're literally just raking the side of the tree with your
Yes.
other hand, correct?
And it's amazing, because again, you're just trying to mimic the sounds that they hear all the time. And you're not exposing them to something new. They're used to it. They know, hey, there's a buck over there raking a tree. Well, I heard this, what I thought was a grunt, but I wasn't 100% sure about that. But I heard this tree being raked that sounded like antlers. So I'll give it a shot. So I grunted 3 or 4 times, like I said. And boy, I saw him. He's coming. He's a good buck. And I'm getting ready. And all of a sudden, about 100 yards out, he just stops. And he looks, and I'm like, he is looking right at me. He snorted and wheeled and ran off and snorted the whole way to alert everybody in the valley that, hey, there's an idiot over there. But I didn't have any face cover on. And as you can see, I've got white hair and a white beard. So it was just one of those little things, those attention to detail, what we were talking about earlier when we first started this podcast, is that it may be the difference between success and failure. Everything I had done up to that point, everything was perfect. It put me in the wheelhouse of a very nice buck. The grunting was dead on. It spoke to him. Another buck's over there. I'm jazzed up because I've been raking this tree, and there was a scrape over there after I got down. He'd actually made a scrape. But I had failed in that one little thing to camouflage my face. And from where his perspective is looking up the drainage, I, I mean, I stuck out like a clown standing under a street light, at 3 o'clock in the morning.
For the street light, you were white.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just those things that if you're going to call blind or you're going to call to some unforeseen deer, you've got to have the camouflage thing right. And that's just basics, back cover. That is, being at making sure you're looking at that from the deer's perspective. So
So from your point, or this is just kind of a little bit deeper on the calling thing, do you notice any difference calling from an elevated position compared to calling from the ground? Because, like, say, for example, the difference between somebody doing like a still hunt or somebody doing similar to like what you're talking about, where they're just kind of sitting on a ruck funnel and just kind of throwing the lure.
I think you get a broader coverage. I go back to the lake analogy. There's a lot of things, the leaves, the trees that, and it's seasonal too. When you first start, and this is a carryover from my turkey hunt days. Uh, Used to our season here in Arkansas, as far as turkey season, open April 1st. A lot of times the leaves weren't out, and you'd hear these turkeys, and you kind of judge the distance about how far they are, and you get within 200 yards, whatever you want to do. But when those leaves gets on, you can often misrepresent how far that turkey is because there's so much blocking that sound that is the gobble of the turkey that's coming into your ears, and you'll often bump him thinking he was farther away than he actually was because all of that foliage is breaking up the sound that's traveling to you. So as you get up higher into the canopy, you've got to deal with that in the early season. Is that there are a lot of things that are blocking that sound. You know, when we're sitting on a lake and it's still early in the morning, you can hear somebody sneeze across the lake over there on their front porch, uh, and it just travels across that glass. The conditions are right. There's nothing blocking the sound, and it's got a great medium to travel across. And that that would be my only difference is that when you're up in a tree early season, when you're grunting these, is that you're not casting as broad a net because there is foliage there. Now, as the leaves get off, ours start to fall here about the first week of November, middle of November, is that you're going to be able to cast a broader net. Now, somebody on the ground, all you're having to dodge is just you know, the tree columns through there. And I think as far as sound, as far as broadcast, it would be the only nuance between being up high and being down low.
Okay. So would that be kind of similar based off of weather? So if you're getting like rain or something else, is that going to make a difference for the distance that sound can travel?
Yeah, yes, 100%. Like I said earlier, that when we have low cloud cover, the the sound can't escape through the clouds. It actually ricochets. In my opinion, it bounces off the clouds because you got the low canopy. It's almost like the sound is traveling along those cloud bases and rattling my windows here. Whereas on a clear day, it just goes straight up because there's nothing blocking it. And so, yeah, I mean, weather has to do with it. Um, I think I used to coon hunt my uncle's a different uncle. He'd grab me up because I had a really good 22 and I was a really good shot with it. And he wanted me to peel these coons out of the trees. And I noticed real quick on a clear night, you could hear those dogs barking a lot better than you could on a cloudy. So I think you're onto something there, Martin. Just off the cuff, I think it will make a difference. And a lot of it is too, a lot of how much ambient noise you've got. If the wind's blowing, you may have to call a little bit louder. Um, I think that definitely comes into play. Um, I think one of the things that I've learned over the years, as far as from the turkey call, and I reference that a lot, but it's just it's calling. You're just broadcasting the sound out there, hoping something responds. Same way with deer calling, duck, all that. Is that you wait for the wind to lay. Wind has a rhythm, you know, it blows heavy while then it'll lay a little bit. When that lays, if you're paying attention, that's when you call. Now, not right there, right where you're at. You know, you got to think about that. If I just had a real big rush of wind come by me, okay, it got calm here, but it's still not calm down there 100 yards as it's
So you
going
gotta wait
by.
that extra, you gotta wait that little extra bit.
To broadcast a 100-yard net or 200-yard net.
So it's the same concept as like turkey tactics. Is you're calling, you're trying to think of almost like the lure thing we can go through again. You're trying to throw that lure to an exact spot, but you also got to think about what we're kind of discussing here is the weather, the wind, the clouds, if there's any canopy cover, if there's any big trees that are in your way, kind of thinking of all the obstacles to like where you're trying to put that lure.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing that I've thought about. I've got a nugget of an idea of making a long range deer grunter for these guys that hunt farmland in Kansas where the wind blows all the time. I personally have hunted mule deer in Wyoming. It was just a spot and stalk type of affair, but the wind blew all the time. So, you know, Kansas, I watch videos of them. My brother lived in Kansas for a time, still does, but he lived out like middle part of Kansas. Wind blows all the time. So you you definitely have to factor that in when it comes to calling, is that coming up with a longer range grunter is something that I've thought about, just, you know, based off what we've been talking about here for the last few minutes. Yeah. And on still mornings, keep it soft. Inhale. If you've got a HattyBo, inhale through it first. You never, I get tickled again, going back to the whole calling part of these young turkey hunters. They'll be walking through the woods and you'll just hear them just start ratcheting on that turkey call. And I guarantee you, son, if that turkey is in 50 yards of you when you started that cutting and that loud yelping, he's gonna booger. And I think, just if you're blind calling, start off soft, just a few grunts, because if you're in thick cover, which you might need to be, and you may, because deer like that type of you know, habitat, just give a few grunts. If nothing responds, maybe a little bit louder. Now, visually, you can base that, you know, where he's at. If he's out there 200 yards, let her rip.
I know we kind of done wide variety of some stories. Most of those were success stories. Did you have any? Obviously, most people learn in the deer woods or just being an outdoorsman by failure. What are some of the failures that you've learned by using this in some of your hunts related to whitetail?
Well, one of the things that people have to remember is that you're letting them know where you're at. And up to that point, they wouldn't be in the area if they knew you were there. So you're cueing them into, and like we talked about earlier, it's a game of hide and seek, and you better be well hid. And I've got busted a lot. I think you really got to be concerned about your backdrop cover. I've been busted more time. I'm one of those guys that just don't really get that high, and you know, you probably need to be up 20 feet, you know, or better, because you're trying to get out of line of sight, but you're giving them a direct audio cue to where your stand location's at. So you need to take that in consideration. I don't think people do. And especially with a bow. Now, rifle, it changes things, because you can reach out there and touch him maybe before he gets into that, you know, like that circle that he's able to see you. But if you're bow hunting, especially, I've learned, I've got busted so many times of not having the proper camouflage, at least from a bow hunting standpoint. Now, if you're on the ground hunting with a rifle or something like that, you kind of nuzzle back into the brush against a tree, and you'll get away with a little bit of that. But bow hunting changes things. And most of my failures have come, as far as the calling realm, is not knowing the lay of the land, maybe his approach routes, and just not paying attention. When it rains, there's a lot of ambient noise out there, dripping off the trees, and that can kind of cloud what's coming into your ears, and they can sneak in on you. So I've been busted a few times, and it just changes. Just be aware of the conditions, because I've failed multiple times by not taking that into account. But I think the biggest one is being, as far as the bow hunter, is to be well camouflaged, and because, like I said, you're letting him know through your grunting or your bleeding, and they're very good with those big cupped ears to get within a few feet, at least a few yards of your tree, and If the conditions are deteriorated to where that you're struggling to be able to hear the deer approaching, it's wet, as often it is in this time, November, or snow cover, that type of stuff. Y'all get a lot of snow up in Wisconsin. It's just be aware. Them eyes they've got to be flitting around all the time, not moving your head, but you gotta be aware that he may be sneaking in on you, because he may be a subdominant deer and he don't really like the idea. He's still cued in socially, but he still doesn't like the idea of maybe getting his rear end whooped, and he may not be spoiling for a fight. So he may be sneaking in, and he may be wearing enough headgear that you want to take him, but you just got to be aware of those. And I've been busted a lot of times. So that, as far as the failure part of it, that's what I'd add to it.
Kind of one step further is, does the direction that you call make a difference? So if that's going upwind, downwind, or you kind of basing the direction that you're shooting, we'll continue using the fishing reference. Are you mainly trying to shoot your lure downwind, upwind, or just where the cover is? Or are you kind of adding those up, no different than like a math equation to do like multiplication?
In any type of calling, especially with someone that depends so much, the species that depends so much on their nose, you want to you want they're going to want to circle downwind of you, and you want to prevent that by having some kind of barrier behind you. It could be a bluff, it could be a thick clear cut, it could be just a natural land abutment, it could be just steep terrain. That it's far easier for me to walk across this creek bottom to you where I heard you calling than to circle up this big steep ridge, because they're masters of efficiency. They don't want to really burn that excess energy if they can keep from it. Now they'll hightail out of it and go up a bluff if they think they're fixing to be hurt, but that's not what we're talking about here. But just when they're casually approaching another deer, they're not going to go to the great extent to call up a ridge to try to get the downwind side of you. So you want to prevent them from coming downwind of you. As far as you always want to have the wind at your favor, and if you've got a quarter in the wind, he's going to try to circle downwind of you, or she is, if they can. But you want to try to look at the topography and prevent that. And again, uh, you don't want to be able to, through excessive calling, for them to pinpoint you. You just want to keep it. A lot of times I'll call away from a deer, even though I'll be looking at it. I'll turn that call behind me and grunt away from that deer, but loud enough he can hear it. And that's just to kind of misdirect the whitetail or the turkey, depending on what you're using, or even coyotes, any of that stuff. Is that you don't want the attention to be on you, but you want him to be cued in socially, or maybe in that dominance hierarchy, to come check you out. Let's just get him meandering. And we're talking mainly about bow hunting here, because it's an up in your face type event. Gun hunters and muzzleloader hunters, you get away with a little bit more, but keep those things in mind. Make sure that it's not easy for him to get downwind of you.
Got it. So I bought this last year, used it a handful of times. If you wouldn't mind, feel free to critique me. So when you're talking about doing the inhale, are you trying to like cup almost like you're doing a duck call for doing that kind of that?
Right. It creates an extra longer. It deepens it, because you're creating a sound chamber with your hands. Also, it muffles it, which that is a good thing. One thing about inhaling it, there's less likely a chance that it's going to freeze up on you, because y'all get some bitterly cold weather up there, more so than we do down here in Arkansas. And if you're a person that calls a lot, those reeds will freeze on you. One thing, if you're breathing in and not introducing any moisture to that call by inhaling through it, it's less likely that it's going to freeze up on you. And I try to make calls to be, you can get loud on the inhale in just for that reason. If you're introducing moisture into that chamber, that is going to cause that reed to start vibrating by breathing into it, the exhale part, it's more likely going to freeze up on you. But cupping your hands like that, get one or two grunts. Yeah, make sure the call's working functionally. A pine needle hadn't. So that's a good technique that you're exhibiting there, Martin. Is that inhaling through it, muffling it, so that if you do have a squeaker note, the deer may not hear it because you got your hand muffled over it. And if everything's good in the call, then you can open it up and it just get louder.
So pretty much you're doing the same cup method, no different than like a duck caller or goose caller is doing, where you're literally building that, you're wrapping it
Yeah.
around on
Yes.
the groove on either the inhale or the exhale side. So you're kind of fitting it, no different than you're putting your bow riser on your shooting hand or your on your hand, and then just cupping it over, and then and are you just trying to do like short, like you're almost like pokes, where you're trying to like change the? Is it literally just three?
Yeah. A grunt is a very short note. It sounds like with that, you may have it set uh, close to a young buck, and it open that up and let me look at it there. Yeah.
I've got it set on that second one like you were talking about, because I would agree, and I've not done a ton of calling, but if I would, especially in a less densely populated deer area like where I'm at in northern Wisconsin, I'd much rather do like you're talking about. I'd rather act like I'm some I know it all teenager than like some old wise guy.
Right. Yeah. As you move that O ring farther down to what the compression wedge is, that it's going to deepen it, and like move it the other way on the audio, like the other way.
Yeah, so if you move it
Yes.
closer,
You
that's
closer
gonna be
out the
more of
end,
like
it
a
gets
deer
higher
bleed,
pitch. Right
correct?
on the end, you get a fawn bleed or an estrus bleed, and or a duck. Yep. And I've heard those doing that when they're looking for a companion. And the bucks don't care if they hear a female doe over there, and they don't care. They're going to come check her out. That's what bucks do. That's what here starting about October 1st or maybe a little bit later. They're making their circuit, and they're trying to catch wind of a doe that may have come through there coming to Estes early. So if they hear one, that's as good as smelling one. So
Got it. So mainly to your point, there's really your go-to is kind of the 3 to 4 notes of, like, making that 1, 2, 3 to kind of make sure that it's consistent on where you're at, or they're able to identify who you are.
yeah, that applies to blind calling. Now, if you see a deer, there's a difference between blind calling and visual calling. If you're blind calling, you're trying to throw a lot of notes out there in case he. But when you see the deer, you visually see a deer, and you want to grunt that deer in. You can read what he is doing by his facial expressions, his body posture. You don't have that luxury when you don't even know he's out there. So the reason I came up with 3 to 4 grunts is, like we talked about earlier, is that you're just trying to pepper him with sound, that with all the ambient noise, him walking through the leaves, the crunching, the squirrels barking, the wind blowing, all that stuff, is that you're trying to, if he missed the first one or the second one or the third one, he may catch that fourth one and lock in that there's a deer over there, and I'm going to go over and check it out. Now, with visual calling, where you see a deer, it's just a one or two notes. You're just grunting loud enough so you're getting a reaction from him. And
And if you're doing to that point, so if you're visually seeing the deer, you're not calling directly at him. You're almost doing that same tactic with the turkey, where you're going a
yes,
different direction to try and you're trying to bring him towards you by throwing your sound behind you.
right. If I see a deer and he's out there and I want him to come over there, he's got enough headgear, I want to shoot a doe. I see that I'll give it a grunt, and just gauge his or her reaction. And if they don't snap that head up, I take it that they didn't hear me. So you get a little bit louder. And if they snap that head up, they have heard you. And then it comes down, are they identifying the sound? Do they understand that that's a deer? Um, and that is a critical time, because if that deer's looking in your direction, ears cut forward, you do not want to call to him at that time when he's looking directly at you, or at least line of sight. Is that Now he may turn, he may swish that tail like we was talking about and start meandering your way, and you've done enough. You don't need to call anymore. Just leave it alone. Get your bow, get your rifle ready, whatever. But if for whatever reason he stands there for a second, he looks away. Now, if he looks away from you and starts looking at other things, um, he may still not be convinced that you're a deer. I mean, that's been my experience. But when he's looking away at you, or he takes a step, and he goes behind the tree, give him another one. And that will pretty much confirm at that point, if he snaps that head around, like, yes, there is a deer there. And he may or may not come. And if he's aggressive or he's social, or because I think deer have personalities. Some are really aggressive, some are not aggressive. They will always shy away from the fight, but they're social. They grow up in groups, and they may come over like, "Hey, are you a buddy? I don't really want to fight." And of course, that's anthropomorphism, where you're putting human characteristics on something that's not human. But it just helps us analogize that may be what the deer's doing. And so when he hears that second grunt, you know, at that time you may pour everything you've got to him. You're not hurting anything, other than you may be more pinpointing where you're at. But now I will say this: I have talking about them failures. I have had them not acknowledge me at all, and then 15 minutes later, I hear something coming from behind me, and he just didn't take a direct path. I don't know if
Yeah,
he
he
thought
took he took the
yeah,
J hook line.
yeah, I don't know if he thought about it and like, yeah, I do want a friend today, or yeah, I don't like that he's in my area, or maybe he's just trying to get downwind of you, or maybe he's trying to get a cover advantage. That's what people don't realize about these whitetails, that they will use a cover advantage. If you've ever looked at any of their bedding areas, those guys are
Thick.
masters.
Yeah.
Yes, thick, and they're always they have the smell advantage or the sight advantage. They saw you long before you ever realized it. They too do one or two bounds up a bluff or into thick cover, and you never knew they were there. The only reason you know now is because you stumbled on their bed and it smells like urine, it's got hair in it and poop in it, maybe a rub around it. And like, oh, this is a deer bed. And I found one time that had it felt like it was warm, like he saw me coming, and when I got in his bed and looked, like, this is perfect. But they're masters of using that terrain, so you want to try to cut out the terrain option by putting some kind of thick cover or a ditch that channels that deer. If he's going to come up to you, he's going to have to come through this chosen route. And you didn't. I mean, I know guys that they fell trees in certain areas that direct those deer through a pathway that they predetermine, because they're going to use that cover to their advantage. So he may not come to you after your grunting sequence, even though you see him at that moment, but he may come back through and check you out because he's just used the cover and the wind as advantage. Yep.
Yeah, I've got a little story to that. So I wasn't using this, but it was a different grunt call. Me and the other gentleman that do the podcast, we were up north of my land, and we were just kind of doing the normal tactic of like toe heel, toe heel. Well, with two of us, it sounded like four different critters moving at the same time. We had an immature buck that ended up coming in while I was taking a piss and he was eating a sandwich. And he kind of just walked off, but he couldn't tell what it was. So I grabbed the grunt call, threw a few grunts out. And to your point, what he ended up doing is he circled downwind, figured out what it was. And by that time, then he blew. So to that note, too, if a doe does her normal blow, are you using the grunt call to cover that up, or kind of act like she's blowing because of a deer instead of some other reason?
I am of the mindset, and I have seen this, that I was grunting one time at daylight, and I was in really thick cover on some private land, and these deer weren't messed with. I grunted right at daylight. I was over a scrape line, and I hear a deer blowing out in the clear cut, and she's upwind of me. I assume I mean, it may have been a buck, but I have come to understand that deer sometimes will blow. Now, if she boogers out and she sees you and stuff like that, I think deer blow all the time. I don't think it really. And when you think about how far sound travels and how these bucks are on their feet, he may not. I mean, I think a deer can travel a half mile in just a few minutes. When they're in that seeking phase, or when they're running their scrape lines, and so you don't say the hunt's over. I need to go home. Just, he may have not heard it, and just hang with it, keep doing your thing. But this doe that I'm talking about, she was blowing, And I talked to a guy about that, and she didn't know what you were. She was blowing to try to identify you to get you to make a move. And I saw that when I went out west elk hunting. That guy that lived out there, he said, now when you're calling these elk, they will bark at you, and that's typically the equivalent of whitetail blow. When an elk barks, it's an alarm sound. He said, but sometimes it's just an identification sound. Well, they will bark at you to try to get you to further do something so that they can identify, make you move, that type of thing. And that actually happened to us on a bull. We could hear his antlers clanking against the pines out there. So we knew it was a bull, and then he barked, and he kind of began to circle down with us, kind of like a whitetail. I thought, that joker's just like a whitetail, but just a doe blowing. Uh, if she boogers out, hang in there, man. I mean, you can try to do the cover sound, and now if she stands out there and blows, I guess I know a buddy of mine that carries a slingshot with him. He'll shoot something at them to get them out if they're just going to stand out there and blow. Try to pop them in the rear end, but that's a little bit on the extreme side. But if a deer blows, don't worry about it. I had one blow out on me. I was going up with my lone wolf up a tree, and she blew and boogered out, and I got up in the stand, and unfortunate, woe is me, all that garbage. And about 30 minutes later, after grunting, she had a very identifying mark on her back. I saw it when she boogered out and stopped out there and blowed. She came back, so that proves that your hunt's not over if they blow at you.
So, but to my question is, so it doesn't make a difference to you unless it's one where she's standing out and addresses you and knows you. Would you use this to act as like that she's blowing at something else than an actual like? Because I've heard it before where they'll blow at a younger buck that just they don't want to deal with them at all.
Every now and then I'll blow back at them. If she don't know where I'm at, she's not pinpointing me. So just something was off a little bit. I mean, she's blowing, she's making noise. I can make the same noise. And, blowing back at them, it really kind of confuses them. But it wouldn't hurt to throw in some grunts there just to further convince the scenario in her mind that there's actually a deer over there. So you're not going to hurt anything by grunting at them, Martin, or anybody else listening.
No, but to my point, does that make any sort of difference for any other? Obviously, it's a situation with you and that doe. But if there's any other deer that hear that, are you better off just letting it be or actually trying to cover it up by using this, but even just by doing some tending grunts, especially with what we're talking about, like a teenager that's just trying to run around?
Yeah, you're not going to hurt anything. You're not going to hurt anything. I don't think you will. Um, Obviously, it's an alarm sound. Deer recognize it as an alarm sound, but I think deer also understand that deer just blow for whatever reason. I had a doe booger out on a squirrel one time. There were horse apples falling in that particular creek bottom, and she was already on the edge because of the thumping that would like boom hit the ground. She was keyed up, and the squirrel jumped out at just the right time, and she had a nice buck behind her. So I mean, they hear those sounds all the time. She snorted, ran off. He followed. I didn't get a shot. The other deer I was watching at, they just looked at her, and she ran off, tail wagging because she saw something she didn't like, and they just kind of did their thing. So throwing in grunts that a doe is out there bleeding, it's not going to hurt you. It's just not. As far as trying to cover up her sound, I don't know that you can do it with a whitetail with a grunter, but you ain't gonna hurt anything by grunting. They hear it all the time.
Well, I think that was pretty in depth. I know you brought up the Hattie Doe. Is there any other deer related products that you're working on, or can you kind of highlight the different calls that you have available?
Well, I've got the original. That's the one that kind of put us on the map. And then I've got one that's about an inch and a half shorter that just for compactness, because I realized that that's a shorty. It's about an inch and a half shorter. I think it does affect the sound a little bit, but not that much. But the original call, which is one I've got right here, it's about 7 inches long, and it just kind of put us on the map. And it's called in tons of deer based off the pictures. We've shipped these to 36 states now, and a lot of those in that first few years were the original size. And then I came out with the shorty because I realized the industry was kind of shifting to compactness with the saddle hunters and going mobile, the mobile hunters, that type of whole thing. And so if you can make a call that is smaller, it's definitely going to make a difference. So that was kind of my mindset behind it.
No, that makes sense. So the three that you've got are the original, the shorty, and then the one that you
And the
highlighted at the beginning,
and the
which
HattyBo,
was
which is
the HattyBo.
yep, those are the three, and these are available at locally here on the website Gelco Outdoors, which is here in Fort Smith. They have a website. It's GELLCO Outdoors, all one word, .com, and they have the product featured under their hunting call tab. And in the off season, you can buy them directly from me. I can't really do any direct sales right now just because I'm swamped to try to keep what few retail outlets I've got. But it never hurts to contact me. You can contact me through Facebook Messenger, and we'll talk. Through text. If I have one laying around, I'll sure sell it to you. But this week I've been working in Walnut and selling a few and trying to build up stock. But yeah, so those are the three that I offer, and all three of those are on Gelco Outdoors website.
Okay. Perfect. So the best way, if anybody's interested in purchasing one or trying to see if you've got any available without having a couple month wait, would be just jumping on the Facebook page.
Yeah, contact me through Facebook, and I will give them the link to Gelco if they have trouble finding the website. So I'm very customer service oriented. Before I quit 3 years ago, I was in customer service. So we will get you taken care of if you contact me through Facebook. We will get you either to Gelco, or if I have one, or if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer what your questions may be as far as the differences and the nuances.
Appreciate the time, Bo. For me, it was very insightful, and I myself have grabbed two or three tidbits that I've never been a caller in the past, especially in a low densely populated area. But I'm really curious to see, depending on the right situation with wind and everything else kind of added in the equation, to see if it can make a difference, and if
Yeah.
maybe I can be the winner for the adult division this
Yeah,
year.
send that picture. If you kill one using a HattyBo and it's framed in the shot, we'll put you in the deal, and then it's just about getting family and all your friends to vote on it, and you get some neat swag. But I'm interested this year. I'm gonna take the HattyBo out, and I'm gonna run a scenario, and maybe that'll be enough in that buck's brain. Like, hey, they got a party going on over there. I'm gonna come check it.
Somebody's got some drinks and cocktails and something on
Sure,
the
yeah,
griddle.
yeah. There's a party going on, and I'm not going to allow that. So, come on in here, big boy. Snorting and them eyes roll back, and I'll put a slick trick through you.
Perfect.
All
Well,
right,
sounds
man.
good, man. I think that's a perfect way to end it. I appreciate your time, and we should
Hey,
definitely
Martin,
do
it's been a
something in the
blast.
spring
It's been a
turkey
blast.
hunting.
Thanks for the opportunity, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Likewise, good luck this year.
See you, buddy.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Geared Up North. The adventure is far from over. If you're searching for more epic excursions, gear reviews, and insider insights, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Geared Up North. Visit gearedupnorth.com for more information, and don't forget our latest episodes are available wherever you get your podcasts.